This sleazy thriller is a who's who of the late 90s, and also Bill Murray. It's also got the soundtrack of the late 90s. It's basically a time capsule. An entire generation of teenage boys sought out wild things for one particular scene. We watched the whole movie though, because we're classy. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. Wild Thing, you make my heart sing. You make everything groovy. Wild Thing. Wild Thing. David's here.
So you're the new chicken licker.
It's vaguely familiar. I'm like, I don't remember that line in the movie, but I'll go along with it.
Yeah, take my word for it.
I'll just assume it's correct and move on. Welcome everyone. It's a movie podcast. We get together, we talk about movies. That's simple. We are working through 90s erotic thriller season. We're getting later into the 90s now. This is our penultimate episode of the season, I think. This is 1998's Wild Things, a movie which I had heard of. I've seen the cover, like, you know, back in the day on the movie store shelf, on the digital library of a streaming service in more recent times. I've always been aware of Wild Things, but I've never for some reason got around to watching it.
It literally exists as the blockbuster filler. It's just there on the wall. No one ever gets it, but it's there.
It was just weird though, because like I was definitely the right age where a lot of like 13-year-old boys would have sought out this movie, but for whatever reason, just never happened. I guess I had more class than that. I wasn't seeking out.
No, that's
filth.
not it.
So just for perversion reasons. I was watching cinema. I was watching Kino.
And there's never any nudity in Kino.
There is, but it's tasteful nudity. It's tasteful.
Right, because a 13-year-old cares about whether or not it's tasteful.
Anywho, this is going to be our discussion of Wild Things. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and we'll talk about the movie from there. If you are enjoying the show, please do hit like on YouTube. Helps us out a bunch, and of course you can get bonus shows every month on Patreon from us, but I'll tell you more about them at the end of the episode. I assume you hadn't seen this either.
Nope, I haven't even heard of this one. This one,
really?
As much as you may have seen it, yeah, no, this is a complete, which is weird because I feel like I'm okay on the movies of Kevin Bacon. Obviously, he has a lot, so it's not like I know everything he's done. But what shocks me, and not to jump too far ahead, is that in a mild role is Bill Murray, and I felt much more comfortable in my knowledge of Bill Murray films.
I would
and this
say
just slid under the radar.
Yeah, I would say it's more than a mild. Obviously, it's not a main role, but it's a pretty big supporting role. He's in a hefty chunk of the movie.
Yeah, and I had no idea this was even on his cinematography credits.
Yeah, it's got a lot of people. I mean, Neve Campbell, Denise Richards, Matt Dillon, Kevin Bacon. There's like a lot of names in this of a varying star level, certainly for the time anyway. Obviously, Kevin Bacon and Bill Murray are a bit more evergreen than the rest of them, but you know, like it's full of people. I'm surprised you hadn't, even just in passing.
I mean, I might have, but maybe like it just didn't make an impression. Like I look at the cover, it didn't strike me as anything. Listened to the title, didn't strike me as anything. So maybe I saw it and it just evacuated my mind for other things.
That's fair. That's fair. I will say this though, I had no idea what the plot of this movie was. Despite the fact that I knew it existed, I had no idea. I knew that there was sexy stuff because that's what the movie was always sold on, right? The one image that was always like with all on the poster, the one image that was always with the movie, if it was in an article or something like that, or it was whatever, it was always the two ladies like by the pool in their bikinis or whatever. It was always sold that way. And to be fair, like my initial impression of this movie is that it might be the sleaziest of all the movies we have done on this season so far.
Yeah, I can get that. I can understand.
So yeah, we'll get into all that stuff. The plot of this, it's actually kind of weird because it's to give a spoiler-free version. I mean, because it's actually very twisty. There's a lot of like what you think's going on isn't exactly what's going on. And then it kind of like pulls that trick a few times. So needless to say, Matt Dillon plays a guidance counselor at a school, and Denise Richards, along with lots of women in this town, apparently really want to bang him. and she's a high school student, may I mention, at this time, and she is gunning to try and get him alone to make that happen. Kevin Bacon plays a cop who deals with sex crimes. Neve Campbell's another student, and I'm just going to leave it there. I don't want to say anything else because it twists, it turns, it does things. Goes from there.
Yeah, no, I mean, this movie, if you said this movie has a twist, I don't think that's a surprise. If you go in any deeper than that, that is spoilers.
Yes. If anything, the only thing I suppose I would say on that, before we even get to our opinions of the movie, is that it maybe, because I didn't know it was going to be that type of movie, and it's probably like a good, like, it's a 2-hour movie. I'd say you're almost at an hour before the first kind of, like, before you realize that what we've been doing up until that point is actually kind of not really what we've been doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like pretty much the halfway point of the movie, because it's an hour 50, and just looking at the time codes, it's like 53 minutes in.
Okay, so it's just interesting from a structure perspective, because you have this first half that feels like it's one story, and then the back half kind of keeps changing things up a lot, I would say. So,
yeah.
Anywho. David, what did you think of Whale Things?
So going into this, I had that same impression that you did, especially as it started, that it just felt like the sleaziest of the movies. It felt like, oh, we've got 2 like jailbait girls going after this guidance counselor, and then ultimately it turns into this, I mean, it turns into this accusation sort of thing, and it all snowballs out from there. And I felt like I had a good grip on the movie. I felt like I understood what it was going for. And then when it pivoted, when it decided to change up its formula, I was like, okay, all right, it's interesting. It's taking a new direction. And then as it kept doing it, I was just kind of left in awe of like, oh, this movie's actually really smart with what it's doing. This movie's actually like, it went through the script writing phase a few times to really work out the kinks. Like, this is a tightly written movie, and it takes care of its points very well here. I think my biggest praise for it is by the time you hit the end of it, so much has happened. But if you go back through the movie, all the clues are there. Like, everything from the beginning, everything has been theoretically available for the audience to understand and get to that final point there. It's not just a twist for the sake of a twist. So ultimately, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a shocking surprise for me how much this one stood out. It felt like it really leaned into both the erotic side of it and the thriller side of it without either side feeling lesser because of the other.
Well, the funny thing is I would say the first half of it feels more just erotic, and then the thriller stuff really comes in a bit more in the back half. But again, that's just another example of like how every single one of these movies this season has been pretty different, and how it's, you know, structured things, how it's focused on one element over the other, whatever. So yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say this, because I think it's kind of sleazy trash, and I think it's twists. I think the movie thinks it's much smarter than it actually is, and I don't really find a lot of what it does that satisfying. I don't dislike it per se, but I was never wowed by anything it did in terms of its twists. Like, for the most part, it just kind of, I was like, okay, we're just going to keep twisting, we're going to keep changing things up. And the funny thing is, though, is that the first half of the movie, even as I was watching it and I didn't know exactly where it was going, something did feel off.
Right.
And I think that's because it is obviously kind of, there's something to reveal about what's actually going on. And I think it goes on a bit too long like that. If it's going to completely say, hey, no, that was not really what you thought it was, and we're going to go on, I think it was maybe too long, especially given how much things change up at a regular pace in the second half, where more and more unfolds. So no, this is a movie from Columbia, aka Sony, and I'll be honest.
Sorry, I hate it now. Never mind.
And I'll be honest, it felt like a Sony movie to me. It felt like a bunch of attractive people, both guys and girls, and have them be. Which actually, on this, there is the most random, out of nowhere, needless, like full frontal male nudity from Kevin Bacon. And
yes.
we don't have to spoil anything because there's no context to it. It's just he's getting out of the shower, and for no reason, his dong's just there, and it adds nothing to what's going on.
Okay, so I'll go into the trivia on this one because I actually read up on a decent amount of
He
trivia.
wanted to show it. He was like, I want my dog on camera.
Exact opposite, actually.
Oh, okay, all right, okay.
He has a no nudity clause in his contract, and they did like, a dozen takes of this scene, and he very quickly in this scene covers himself with a towel. But this just happened to be the one take where the timing was off. He turned before the towel was ready, and therefore full frontal nudity. And apparently, this was one of the only takes where it did happen like that. And when it got to the editor's room, it was a female editor. And she was like, look, the whole rest of this movie is all just for the guys. Can we just have this one? Can we please, for the love of God? And they went and talked to Kevin, and he was like, I mean, do I look good? And they're like, yeah. It's like, all right, fine, put it in, whatever. So, like, yes, it is completely plot irrelevant, but honestly, it's only as plot relevant as I would say a lot of the other sexualized forms of, like, Denise Richards are in this.
I don't know if I agree with that.
No, don't get me wrong. There are scenes where it is necessary to plot, but there are just as many scenes where it is for the sake of the audience.
I mean, that's probably some truth to that, but like the whole point of her character is that she's this and that she's trying to seduce and she's trying to, like that. That's everything. Right. This like it's got nothing to do with his character or who he is or why. It's just a random bit of nudity. So it turns out it was random on set. It wasn't meant to happen, and they just kept it in.
And I love the follow-up bit of trivia on that was in the American press circuit for this movie, he was hit up all the time about it. Like, oh my God, you finally showed your dick. What about it? And then he went to the European press circuit and they're like, and? Whatever.
They don't care. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Just kind of weird and stuck out as like just
it was sticking out all right.
But normally when you like there's someone doing full frontal, right? It's one thing because no one else in the movie does full frontal. Let's make that clear.
Yeah.
Normally, when full frontal nudity is a thing, it tends to be, unless it's like a really sleazy, we're just doing lots of nudity sort of thing. It tends to be in a scene where the character is either vulnerable or the fact that they're doing something naked in a sexual way is a big part of the themes or the character's journey. It's a pivotal point in the story. Right? Any other time I can think of where a male actor gets his cock out for a scene, it tends to be for an important moment, and that's why this stuck out to me. Is it was just a nothing. Like he literally, it's just, there's no purpose to it. It's just kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean, it was there. It was noticeable, but I don't know. I kind of appreciate the movie for not drawing attention to it, to not making it a big deal, because it's just like. With how sexualized every other character in this is, it's kind of interesting to me that they would just be like, and here's nudity just as it exists. Like, it doesn't have to be this sexual thing. It's just what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to compliment them for that, because had they known they were going to shoot him naked, they probably would have made it a bit different and probably emphasized it more. The reason why it has that natural quality to it is because it literally was an accident. So.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, they still had to make the choice, but they had a dozen takes. They could have used another one if they really wanted to.
Yeah, but I just mean that specific compliment you just gave it, which is they don't draw attention to it. Like that wasn't really their choice.
Oh, well, yeah, that's fair.
That's just the way it happened. So
yeah, they didn't have footage to then zoom in on Kevin Bacon's ass and be like, check this out, ladies.
Oh dear. So yeah, I don't. It's a trashy movie. I don't think it's quite as smart as you're saying it is. It's got a sense of humor. Like I'll give it that. But at a certain point, the twists weren't satisfying to me. I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, of course. Like I wasn't excited by them, especially when it pulls some really kind of like wild ones really late in the game.
Right. I will admit, I think that maybe it went like a twist too far. I think that, it was up to a point you start expecting twists to happen. And therefore, I think it went maybe just one too far for me. But all in all, I think that it was intelligent with the way it was playing them out and how they explored them at the end of the movie. I think it was smart in the way it set it up. And I think that trashiness that you're talking about, I felt the same way. I felt, going into the movie, there's a sequence where two students go to Matt Dillon's house and like they want to wash his car and they're wearing very thin white t-shirts. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But I feel like that's intentional on the part of the writing, because as it progresses, it reveals how this trashiness was always just a ruse. Like, not even just in the writing standpoint, but from a character standpoint as well. There was always this hidden layer to it, and they was always just to put on a level of an act. So I think in a lot of ways it's mirroring the plot of the movie itself by getting the audience to be convinced that it is trashy in this specific way, and then once it makes its shift, it changes significantly.
Yeah, it just becomes trashy in a convoluted thriller.
See, I don't think it's trashy in the back half. I think it actually handles it pretty well. As you were saying before, in the back half, the sexiness and the nudity and all that kind of take a back seat to the more thriller aspects.
Yeah, I just like, I get what you're saying, and you're right to a point, but like, I would be okay with the intentional trashiness which has a purpose, if the purpose was like really telling a character story or something like that. But in this movie, like, there's not really, I mean, if anything, Matt Dillon feels like he is the main character, but that kind of like fades away and becomes a bit more obscure as the movie goes on. So it feels like it is just for the sake of the twists. And I don't know, like, it feels like it's a movie built around just twisting as much as possible, as opposed to it being about, like, oh, there's an actual character story here that we want to tell, or there's an actual, ups and downs. I guess on some level, I just find the entire conceit of this movie to be a little bit shallow. And I think I never really got over that.
I get what you're saying, and I understand that, but I go back to the way that, like, I experienced Basic Instinct for the first time as we were watching it through a few weeks ago. And that movie, I feel like the back half was entirely built on twists in much the same way. Yes, there was a lot more of this sort of character development. I'm not going to lie and say that this movie is up on that level, because it's not. But I think that it did have an intelligence to it that was elevating it past this initial trashy conceit of it. I think that it was something where, if you map it out on paper and you really lay out how everything worked out, it does have a complexity that could rival Basic Instinct in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but that's just in plot, though. I think the big important distinction here is that with Basic Instinct, you can actually sit and analyze both the characters involved in the story, but why they're being tricked, or why they're making decisions, what their motivations are. Here, it's more just a lot of plot lines that are interwoven or whatever. And yeah, I'm not saying there's not actual motivations that are revealed. They are, but they're not like in depth in the way that you can sit and talk about, okay, why the character feels this way. And it's just, character does a thing, and then you're given just a sentence as to why they wanted to do that thing, and that's it. It never really goes any deeper than that.
Yeah, no, the characters are absolutely shallow. It's you get like 2-3 lines of motivation, and occasionally the motivation will switch upon a reveal of a twist for multiple different characters. That's totally legitimate, but yeah, it is very much a one-sentence line of a character. But I don't know, I found myself being entertained by the twists and turns that they were taking, and it really changed my opinion of the movie even just halfway through, when my initial thought was, okay, I know where this is going. I know this sort of trashy film and how we're going to like play out these different plots forward. And it caught me by surprise numerous times. And I don't think that it was an unearned surprise. I don't think it's one of those twists where they just throw it in there without any sort of warning. Like I said, if you go back and watch it, I think that every single one of these things is telegraphed in a way that is subtle enough that you only would see it on a rewatch.
I was groaning at them by the end of the movie, so I don't feel this enthusiasm for it, and
that's fair.
It's wild to me that this is the one you're defending. I was defending Bound and Last Seduction, and you're defending Wild Things.
I don't know what to do. Maybe we got different expectations out of this series or something, but this one was the one that so far reminded me the most of how I felt during Basic Instinct, where it kept me enraptured. It kept me interested.
Well, hold on a second. Why is Basic Instinct the barometer for what you think these should be?
I don't know. It just strikes me as the one that, like, I mean, so far it's the one that I enjoyed the most. I would, not to spoil too much, but I would say even including this one, it's the one that I think is the one that hit the points right. It is the one that managed to perfectly balance the idea of eroticism and thriller. It managed to be its own suspenseful, action-packed movie while also keeping up this sexy appeal to it. So that's something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind with all these other movies. Yes, I've been judging them on their own merits, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the erotic thriller, that's kind of the high water mark that I've been looking at.
Okay. I thought Bone was better, but that's fine.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that was it Bound? I've completely lost track of which ones are which. Yes, it was Bound. I think that that one did have a lot more of the thriller moments, but we did a whole thing on little bits in there that I thought were lacking.
Yeah. I think this just feels a lot more vapid to me. Even if even if there's a purpose to it, it still feels like it is just there to be titillating in the way that you want the audience to be excited by the attractive people in these situations, the constant flirting, the constant attempts at affairs, and whatever. Because one of the things that was sticking out to me at the start of the movie was just how, everything was about sex. Every single line of dialogue, everything.
Right.
There's a Kevin Bacon and his partner, a guest speaker at this, the high school, and they're giving a speech to the class about sex crimes, and they say, "What is a sex crime?" And some teenager shouts out, "Not getting enough," or something to that effect. And I'm like, okay, that's what this movie is. And then, of course, like a couple of minutes later, when we're in a scene where they're driving, there's like just like the most late 90s like pop rock song playing.
All right. I am not going to defend the soundtrack of this movie. It was Semi-Charmed Life. And as much as I love that song independently, it is of a very specific era.
Yeah, I don't mind the song, but it just like I was like, oh my god, I'm watching American Pie all of a sudden, because that's what those types of tracks make me think of American Pie, because that's exactly the sort of soundtrack that I had. So I just like, as I was starting up, and like even like Denise Richards' mum in the movie wants to bang Matt Dillon.
Yeah. Like she comes out on a balcony in just her like bra and underwear and just like, "Hey Maddie, you want to come inside?"
Like just everyone, and I'm like, okay, all right, whatever. I don't know. I didn't find, and maybe part of it's because we're not really seeing the real. I don't know. I don't want to say too much, but like, I just never really found myself connecting to any characters, because it's absolutely a movie that entirely plays the idea of like, which characters can you actually get invested in and root for? You don't know who to root for in this movie. There's no kind of like clear answer to that.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's entirely fair, but I don't think that that's a negative. I think that the idea that you're constantly on your toes of like, who's the hero here? Who's the one that's actually the one that's being correct? I mean, even in the first half of the movie, it plays out with that idea. You don't know who's telling the truth about this situation because of how it's edited. So I think that that's fully the point of the movie, is you get attached to characters just because of what you see their motivations are, but ultimately those may be flipped. They may be lying. Like any character has the potential to change into the villain with a single reveal.
I don't know. I kept waiting to feel something beyond just the surface level, or will it or won't it kind of thing. That's all it ever was like, well, this happened or this happened. It never went any deeper than that for me. I found it to be a pretty shallow thriller, and all the erotic stuff, well, it does have a purpose in the plot. It still feels sleazier than any of the other ones we've done so far. I'm not going to say it's the worst one, because I do think it's probably better than Single White Female, but I wouldn't put it above any of the other ones.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. For me, I think that it is shallow. Don't get me wrong. Like, talking about the characters, there's not a lot of depth there. There's absolutely not that much, but it just kept me intrigued. It kept me interested, and there was, as vapid as you say it is, there was this interest to it. It wasn't something where it was just like, and now this twist happens, and we didn't tell you anything about this before, and it's completely impossible to guess. Like, I think that there was thought put into this so that they made it an actual intriguing mystery. I mean, the details of which are basically, when is the last twist, more or less? Like, you have to keep on guessing whether this is the actual final plot or whether or not it's going to twist again. But I don't know. I was just into it the whole time. And it's not so much that I think it is highly skilled and like telling this deep interwoven story of multiple people and their lives and motivations and whatnot. I think it's just a good time. I think that it was well done. It was put on onto a good script, and the actors gave good performances. I didn't have by the time I was done with it, a groaning reaction to things. I thought, okay, yeah, no, that was solid.
I was over it. I was over it.
That's
About
fine.
half
I
an
mean,
hour before the end.
I wouldn't say half an hour. I would say this movie went one, maybe two twists too far. But I even then, I think the second one of those would have worked out fine.
I think the problem for me is that some of the twists are too similar to earlier twists. They do change things up, but they change things up in the exact same way they changed them up before. And I found that kind of like, oh, well, I'm not surprised or excited by this twist because it just feels another version of the exact same twist that we did 20 minutes ago.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I've got that.
I mean,
so here's an interesting tidbit though on the movie is that it's directed by the director of Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I actually can't see anything else in his filmography that's that notable that anyone would have maybe heard of, except that. And I actually remember liking that movie. It's been a while since I've watched it, but it was a sort of gnarly movie for its time. This is a weird detail I didn't know about until right before we started. I looked up who the director was and went, oh, okay. Even weirder is that he's not done anything since 2013, but he's got 3 things in pre-production or something. Like, that's very strange.
I mean, that might just be one of those things where IMDb just like, here's an article or whatever.
Sure.
Like I'm seeing one here, a TV series of Chicago Hack, where that was from 2016 and it's still just listed.
Okay.
So,
all right. So, well, best of luck to him.
yeah.
Best of luck.
I mean, it's definitely a choice to go from Henry to, I mean, how many movies were in between that? Oh, he had a good like dozen films in between. So I don't know any of them to know if this was a slow evolution to get to the point of Wild Things. But
not a clue.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a single one of them. So, yeah, I mean, anything else you want to talk about before we get to spoilers?
I briefly touched on it, but I think that there were no real bad performances in this movie. I think everybody did a very good job of, as shallow as their characters were, I think they got across the characters fine. I fully understand where they were at any point. I think the only one, and it's not her fault at all, but Neve Campbell plays who's supposed to be a trailer trash girl, and she just does not fit that part for me. Like, good on her, she acted the role well, but she does not fit that role.
It's also a big part of her character as well, because it's a lot of like who she is that, oh, you think I'm trailer trash, you think I'm this.
Right.
If anything, I was getting more like just sort of goth vibes from her.
Yeah.
For the most
she
part.
felt like, I think it's Allison from The Breakfast Club. Like,
oh, sure.
Just kind of that little awkward outcast, like, beat of her own drum sort of character.
Yeah. I mean, the performances, I thought it was kind of weird because, like, I mean, Kevin Bacon is a good actor. He's been, I mean, I've seen him being some absolute trash as well, admittedly, but
yeah.
I think Matt Dillon's a weird one for me because I feel like Matt Dillon just is always Matt Dillon, and I think one of the things actually that felt a bit weird in that first like half is that you're not being Matt Dillon yet, and I've got a feeling that you're going to be Matt Dillon by the time we're done, and you know it was almost like casting Matt Dillon was like a signpost for something. So I don't know, but weird.
I mean, that was the same sort of thing I had with Neve Campbell at the beginning, is that she's for a while in the beginning not focused on. She's just kind of left as a secondary character.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, but you're top billed, so clearly you're going to be coming into this. You're going to be brought into the fold and made a like central character.
Kevin Bacon's kind of like that as well, where you see him early on, but he kind of disappears for a long stretch, and it's not until things really get going where he starts coming back into the story a bit more. I mean, I think by the end, the 4 people that are considered the main characters absolutely are the 4 main characters, but they all kind of come in different, spurts at, at different times in the movie where they really start to like get their screen time.
Yeah, I'd say so. I do feel bad for Denise Richards. Obviously, she doesn't have too many roles up until this point. I think she just finished with Starship Troopers before this. But she didn't get any sort of like top billing on the poster or anything, so she's just kind of left as the last one, despite the fact I would say her role is probably, I don't know, I'd say for most of the movie it's secondary. I'd say she's pretty much the secondary character for more than half the movie.
I mean, yes, murky though, because you're like, well, who's first? Because I know in the first half it's Matt Dillon, but I wouldn't say he is the the focus in the
Right.
second half. So
Yeah, the second half throws it all for a loop.
yeah, I would just say that I think by the end, all four, like, if anything, Neve Campbell's probably fourth, which is funny given some things. But,
Yeah, given the movie.
But I would say that do you know what it is? I think she gets a bit more billing here because she was already in Scream, and Scream was a hit, and that gets you billing on future movies when you might not have otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair.
Maybe
She was also starring in Party of Five at this point, but I don't know how popular that was.
I think it was I mean, I didn't know what it was at the time, but like I think it was relatively popular. I think the other thing as well, maybe if this was like after Richards had done the James Bond movie she did, maybe that would have changed things a little bit. I don't know.
She would have gotten even lower billing.
I mean, I don't think that would be true, but I don't like James Bond, so I found it funny.
Yeah.
So.
The only other thing I want to touch on, and this is something that we've been after the show. You've been messaging me with the sequels to these movies look like absolute garbage.
There's at least 2 for this one, I think.
There is 3 for this one. And I am highly concerned about that because if I'm arguing that this movie is like borderline but not quite dipping into full sleazy territory, like actually doing something, I imagine every single one of those is just like, all right, this is just softcore porn now, and we're gonna loosely throw in a plot over top of it.
Honestly, so many of these movies have at least one direct-to-video sequel that we could do a season of just number 2s all really. I mean, there's a Basic Instinct 2 that actually got released in theaters. There's The Last Seduction 2. There's
Wild Things 2, Cruel Intentions 2.
Yeah, I think Crash is the only one that probably does. Oh, Bound as well. Crash and Bound don't have sequels.
Does Bound not? I feel like I remember looking that up.
I mean, if it does, I'll be like, I won't be shocked, but it definitely won't be the same people. It'll be some thing with just the name.
Yeah,
I suppose we could do the Oscar-winning Crash as the sequel to Crash. I suppose if you really,
you know what, that's enough to cancel the season. I don't want to do that anymore.
Just a lot of extra reels. We'll just have to do 90s erotic direct-to-video season, which is a whole year of extra reels, just doing all these crappy sequels.
Yep, there you go.
There you go.
Perfect. If it gets me away from more Bill Cosby, I'll take it.
We did one Bill Cosby movie,
and I never want to go back.
I mean, that was torture. It was terrible, but that's not the point. Yeah, Joe's. I clicked on Denise Richards' filmography because I was curious what has she done in the last, like, I mean, at this point, 20 years. It's been a while. And there's a bunch of like direct-to-TV stuff. There's all those like sort of Christmassy movies they make for nothing, you know,
like Hallmark.
Just all that kind of fare and whatever. But I was reminded scrolling really far down that when she was younger than this, she popped up in an episode of Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, and Jimmy Olsen asked her out on a date because I think she was maybe about his age in it.
Well, so Jimmy can aim high, I guess.
Well, that's what's so funny in hindsight is you watch it and go, that's Denise Richards. Now, admittedly, her cachet has fallen off dramatically in the last couple of decades, but there was a time at the end of the 90s, at the start of the 2000s, where she was seen as kind of like one of the most attractive people on the planet.
Yeah,
so it's really funny in hindsight that Jimmy Olsen's taking his shot, and you know, oh, that's right, yeah, because our first big movie, of course, is Tammy and the T-Rex. That was 1994.
Yes, who could forget Tammy and the T-Rex?
You're just lucky that it's already done. We already did it as a bonus episode, I think.
I'll take it. And I don't have to do homeworks on the bonus episodes. Double win.
Well, maybe when you run out.
I don't. I make the rules on homework. I don't have to.
I think there's some that's worth doing.
I will do it if it is required to finish up a franchise or something, but I am not doing it on my own.
Look, I will say this. You should watch Time Cop.
All right. Fair enough. I'll just do Time Cop on my own. Whatever.
Time Cop's worth a look, which does have a direct-to-video sequel, by the way, that we've never done. So
God, they all have them.
So I'll just have to make an excuse to do Time Cop 2 on either extra reels or, dare I say, just a main episode of Ace.
You know, it's weird to consider this, but like looking at like, you know, stuff we've done on the Ace recently, we've focused on a lot of 80s films. A lot of those ones got TV spin-offs. And yet when it comes to the 90s, it seems like the default was direct-to-video sequels rather than TV spin-off.
I think that direct-to-video market boomed.
Yeah. It's just weird to think about how they just made that pivot over where they're like, all right, we're not going to give you a TV show, but you are going to come back again.
Well, too many of them probably got cancelled immediately because they weren't very good. And they thought to themselves, maybe we should do something different.
Maybe let's not try to rent out primetime space for this, and we could just take that shelf on Blockbuster.
Yep. All right, spoilers for Whale Things. You have been warned for all 8 twists.
I would highly suggest, if you have any interest, this movie is reliant on its twists, so do not listen to us if you plan on watching it at all.
Yes. I mean, where it begin? This feels like so twisty and turny. The thought of going through this in order just makes me want to bash my head against the wall.
I mean, obviously, the biggest place to start is we're at a high school. We're outside the Florida Everglades, and
actually, that's the first thing. Is the opening titles playing over, and I wasn't even sure where we were because I was like, "Where is that? Is this like?" Because I saw those what do you call those boats that they drive around on with the big fans at the back?
I just called them fan boats. I don't know if they have a different name.
Where it's basically just a platform with a chair and a fan, and like someone's going to, and I was like, "Wait, are we?" I genuinely thought we were in a different continent. Right, I legitimately did. I was like, "Is this somewhere in Africa?" Because it feels like it.
Yeah, it's always for swamps. It's if you see one of those in cinema, you are either in Florida or Louisiana. There is no in between.
But like eventually it does transition to like showing like a city, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's probably Florida. It looks like Florida now." But there was a whale where I was like, "I don't know what this is. What's going on here?" I mean, hey, if anyone was going to try and pull off the plot of this movie, it's people that are from Florida.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
and you want to talk about a trashy movie? You're gonna set it in Florida.
Dear. So Matt Dillon's character Sam, guidance counselor, he's basically just kind of introducing the talk by the police at the sex ed or sex crime discussion, whatever it is.
We see like a walking in behind him shot, and we notice that like all the girls are eyeing him up. Like as he's walking by, everyone's like, "Oh my god, it's the guidance counselor."
Everyone's into him. Yep. Yeah, very fancy high school, because this looked more like a university like lecture hall to me than it did a high school one. But I mean, whatever. Fancy.
Yeah, I mean, you get it big enough. So it did seem like this is kind of a richer area of Florida.
Well, that's a big part of the movie, and the part of Sam's character is that he is not one of the rich people. He's doing okay, but like he's surrounded by all these rich families, and he's had sex with many of these rich women who he's got no interest in staying with. But like the movie makes it clear as time goes on that he is of a lower class of living than most of the people that live in this town.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, interesting character. You see Denise Richards making eyes at him, and probably the first little bit of like setup for the whole twist to come is Neve Campbell getting mad and leaving the auditorium and saying she hates Kevin Bacon, and the character, not Kevin Bacon, the actor.
No, she just says him by name. It's really weird.
Yeah, really strange. But very quickly, I mean, we get just a series of things here. We get a lot of it hints for what's to come later, but we get Denise Richards like, "Hey, my mom didn't come pick me up. Could you take me home, Mr. Lombardo?"
Yeah, Lombardo just turns to like this dude he's teaching boating. He's just like, "What about you, Jimmy? You need to go home too?" And you just see Denise Richards' face just be like, "Son of a bitch."
Yeah, which makes him look like he's trying to do the right thing. He's like, "Okay, I'll give her a lift, but I'll make sure I'm not alone with her," just to, do that. One of the things that actually, obviously you've got all the stuff with the girls that clearly try to bang their teacher, which feels a bit sleazy. But one of the lines of dialogue actually that right away made it feel like, oh, the writing of this movie is going to annoy me, is there's a moment where Kevin Bacon and his partner, what was her name?
I couldn't even tell you.
Oh God, Perez, yeah.
Yes.
They're walking back to the car, And Kevin Bacon says, "Oh, this guy, something better at work." And she's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Oh, he's clearly some kind of hound. Look at him." And again, this is more set up for later to make everyone think that he hates him. But she says, "Oh, I don't know. He's kind of cute. I'd do him." That line, "I do him," coming from this professional woman who, like, because there's scenes later in this movie where they're sitting like in an interrogation room and they're talking to a teenage girl who's saying she was raped. And this woman is standing there and taking it seriously, and she's treating it with this sort of touch that all the men in the room aren't quite doing. Her introduction in this movie, other than just seeing her standing on stage before this scene, is her saying that she'd do him to like the main male character in the movie. I don't know, it rubbed me the wrong way.
I mean, here's the thing. So we get to it further down the road here, but just to talk about like the trashiness of it and like the setup for the initial plot is that because of things that happen later, Sam gets accused of rape. Like, that's what happens there. And the initial plot does not directly tell you whether or not he's innocent. It shows her going into his house. It shows her very sad as she's walking out. She like runs away, but it doesn't show you what happens. So you're left wondering whether or not Sam actually did do this. And I think that the initial point of this scene, all this stuff going into it, is to get you on Sam's side, to get you to see him as the protagonist, the guy who was wrongfully accused for numerous reasons we'll get to. But I think that solely exists in your mind because then because of the genre savviness, you go into this, you're expecting the twist. You're expecting Sam to have been the one that actually did do it. And again, we'll get to it, but it ends up not being that, and that's where I think it gets really clever with it.
Okay, that's one take. That's fair. Honestly, I think it's just going to be easier right now if I just sum up the entire movie because I feel like talking around where it's going to go later is pointless and it just makes it more confusing to listen to. So I'm just going to try and sum up in a sort of short form way before we start diving into maybe specific scenes and moments and all that. So
all right.
The opening chunk of the movie, which is basically the first half of the movie, is that Denise Richards wants to be alone with them, makes an excuse to come and wash his car with the other girl for charity or something, and she then comes into his house uninvited. We don't see what happens. She leaves, like you said, and then she gets home, and when her mother's berating her, she says, "Lombardo raped me." And she gets upset because she's been trying to have sex with him, so she's doubly upset. She's upset that not only did he do this potentially to her daughter, but also she's feeling rejected. Whatever.
Well, she did have sex with him before, but he's not coming back again.
Yeah,
so
I mean, she wants more sex, is what I mean. Though she's wanting repeat visits. So the first half of this movie turns into a legal battle where it's about him defending himself from these claims and her saying that they happened, and we see her with the cops. We see him, how people react to him and his reputation being destroyed by it and all that.
She's also, her family is like the richest family in town. Like they have power, they have pull, they are able to ruin his life.
Right. And it's all very 50-50. We don't know as the audience what actually happened. I will say when she left the house, I read the performance as she is disappointed she didn't get laid. That's what her face looked like to me at the time. But that's before she even said the accusation. Maybe if I had that in my head at the time, maybe I would have read it differently. But that's what it looked like to me. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, you saw the way that she was acting before, and it's, I don't know, I don't want to lean into like very problematic things of like, you know, quote unquote, she was asking for it sort of things, but it's very clear that she did want something to happen. So with her leaving and looking disappointed, I think that is the initial way that pretty much everybody's going to read it. This idea of she didn't get what she wanted in that instance.
Yeah, but like, specifically, it's like she didn't get the sex, right? And the way it plays, I think, to the audience for the most part in this first half, when she makes these accusations, and this is even what Perez thinks after she talks to her, she actually calls her on her, not to her face, but she says to her other colleagues, I call bullshit in this, I think she's lying. I think she wanted him, he rejected her, and this is revenge because she's a spoiled rich brat who wants to, ruin him. And I think that's what the audience is probably going to be leaning towards, but with the idea being, but the twist might be that he actually is a complete evil scumbag. He keeps saying that he doesn't sleep with his students, blah, 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 blah. The big sort of development about halfway through this story, though, is that Neve Campbell wants to see Kevin Bacon and his partner. And we see where she's living and so on and so on. We'll talk about that more later. But she then says, a year ago, he did the same to me. And they ask her some questions, and she even quotes almost directly the same thing that apparently he said to Denise Richards after the act was done, right? So obviously later on when we find out this is all like a ruse, it's something that they're all involved in and they've planned. This was intentional to make it sound convincing. So it's going to go to court. We see the case, all that. Well, obviously, we'll get into separately all the introduction of Bill Murray and his character and all that stuff. Just
he's basically just a Better Call Saul sort of character.
He's a very Saul Goodman, yeah, he really is. Although, also very Peter Venkman. I'll go on that later, right?
Absolutely.
So, the big thing in the court case, though, is that at one point, through questioning by Bill Murray's lawyer character, right, when he's cross-examining Neve Campbell's character, she kind of breaks a little bit, and it sounds like maybe she's about to tell the truth that something didn't really happen, and it's almost like they intentionally had a lie, sort of that they could catch her on, which Bill Murray did. She then admits that nothing happened, and she then even says it was all Denise Richards' idea, and then Denise Richards starts getting really upset, and the audience starts shouting and screaming and whatever else, and basically the entire thing crumbles. And it's clear that he's innocent of what he's been accused of, that this was a plot by this rich girl, or one rich girl and one poor girl. And, this is bad now. And immediately Bill Murray's like, all right, we can sue that family. You know that, right? They drug you through the mud. They've done this. We can do this.
During all that interstitial stuff, we see how his life was falling apart, and he was being assaulted and driven off the road at times as well. He has pain and suffering he can definitely capitalize on here. But
the first twist of the movie, which comes after they've settled with, the mum, with Denise Richards' mum, was her name Sandra? Yeah, Sandra. Sandra Van Ryan. Of course, it's Van Ryan. It just sounds
the moment
rich.
you add a Van to your name, you immediately get $500,000, just like that.
I mean, I'll do it. If I get $500,000, I'll do it. But
no, it works in reverse. You get the van, and then you get the money.
The big twist halfway through is that Matt Dillon, Denise Richards, and Neve Campbell's characters have all been in cahoots, and every single part of this was all just designed so that he could eventually sue Denise Richards' mum and get a bunch of her money. Denise Richards wanted to do this because there's a big trust fund for her that she's not allowed to access until her mother dies, so she wants a piece of that pie early. Neve Campbell hates Kevin Bacon's character for busting him, and that was part of her motivation.
Yeah, it's not even she just wants the money at this point. We find out the motivation later, but at this point she's just I'm in on this too, because clearly I needed to be we needed someone who was going to break on the stand and also frame Kelly at the same time in order to get this all to work.
Right, so it looks like it's all falling apart, but this was actually their plan, and this is where Matt Dillon finally starts acting like Matt Dillon, where it turns out, he not only is he going to have sex with his students, he's going to have sex with two of his students at the same time. They have a threesome, and then they're never going to speak to each other again because it's too risky. They have to stay apart. And then that propels into the second half of the movie, which goes in its own directions, where Kevin Bacon, he knows it, he smells a mystery. He's like, no, this is a bunch of bullshit. They plotted all this, they did all this, which honestly, at the time, I was frustrated by, because I'm like, why are you convinced of this? Obviously, he's convinced of this is because he knows about it, because he's in cahoots with Matt Dillon the whole time to double cross the girls. Later. Yeah. But at the time, you don't know that, so it felt like, you're really sure of this, and it feels like you just don't like him, and you're just jumping to conclusions.
Well,
that just happen to be right.
His evidence that he gives is that there's so many things that he could have brought up in the case that would have cleared his name prior to that, but he just didn't, and therefore he was basically saying why would he do that unless he wanted it to get to the point where he could do a settlement like this.
Okay. So then the movie kind of revolves around the idea of do the three characters that were in cahoots all trust each other?
Kevin Bacon stoking them, just being like, "Are you sure they're not going to cut you out? You positive?"
Specifically, the two girls. He goes to them individually and says, "Hey, you're just a bit of, trailer park trash. They're going to like just dump you and move on."
Yeah, he is really, really overly mean to Neve Campbell, and it's implied that there's some other kid named Davy, and
her boyfriend, I assume, from a year ago.
Something happened between those two, and that explains why she was so pissed off at Kevin Bacon at the beginning. But he's like needlessly cruel to her and basically says like, "I am gonna catch you. I swear on that, so you better watch your back."
Yeah. And he also goes to Denise Richards and sort of says, "Hey, you think he loves you? No, he's just using you. He's going to like ditch you and whatever." So like it sets up all this mistrust and all this sort of thing. And then it actually goes down a path where seemingly Denise Richards and Matt Dillon murder Neve Campbell's character. And,
she's getting too twitchy.
Yeah, they leave evidence. She's getting too nervous about keeping the secrets and all that jazz. And I mean, we'll cover the specifics in more detail when we're actually talking about individual things. But ultimately, it turns out that Matt Dillon and Kevin Bacon have been working together because by the time we get to that reveal, Kevin Bacon was in a position where, again, apparently Denise Richards tried to shoot him, so he shot her and killed her, right? Of course, we later find out that's not true either. It turns out he's working with him, so it's the two guys who are going to split the money, right? But then, when Matt Dillon tries to kill Kevin Bacon tries to fight back, but that's when it's revealed that Neve Campbell never actually died, and not only that, she kills Matt Dillon, and it turns out she was the mastermind of this thing the whole time, and also was working with Bill Murray, who was making sure she was going to get the money. Because that was the one thought I had at that point at the end of the movie, was like, wait, how's she going to get the money? It was all in like Matt Dillon's bank accounts or whatever.
Yeah, we got it all transferred over. And it makes sense. He's the lawyer who was overseeing the whole thing. He can make that work.
Yes. So, yeah. Apparently Denise Richards wasn't meant to die. That was just Kevin Bacon going off script because he's got a bit of a bloodlust for killing teens, apparently, based on his backstory.
I mean, we can get to it, but thinking about it, there's only two major plot holes that I just can't figure out how it would have worked. Number one is apparently Denise Richards wasn't supposed to die. I don't understand how the plan was supposed to go if she lived.
I think they say she was meant to be framed for Neve Campbell's murder, and she would just go away for that. Jail,
but then she'd be able to like say like, "Oh, but we didn't actually kill her. We just left her or whatever." Like, I mean, that would theoretically still be a thing. Would they believe her? Would they be long gone by that point? Yeah, fair. And then the other thing is, at the very beginning when it's Matt Dillon looking for a lawyer, I don't understand how he ended up at Bill Murray's desk, and it feels like that should have somehow been put there by Neve Campbell. Because she would have needed him to work through that. Yeah, it feels like, he just happened to land in the lawyer. I mean, they do say at one point he can't go to any of the regular lawyers. That's why he travels out to this extra like side area where Bill Murray's office is, because all the lawyers in town all work for the rich people and none of them are going to like go for him, which is fine, but like he could have easily have driven in the other direction to another town and got a lawyer from there instead. So that I think the other thing for me is that, like, I always get a bit frustrated, especially if it's not like just like it feels like silly good fun, where a character's meant to have been a mastermind about how everything's went, and it's been so twisty and turny and twists upon twists. The idea that she faked her death, blah 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 blah, is that fundamentally like half of what's happened couldn't have really been in her plan. A lot of it was going to plan, but even just something as specific as what happened to Denise Richards' character, that was something that went off book. And obviously she orchestrated the idea of like, hey, Matt Dillon, because by the way, this movie has like 15 mid-credit scenes that explain a lot of the little things and how they happened. I know sometimes you don't stick around that deep into the credits. I was hoping you did catch those. Well, this one does like one credit and then gives you a scene, gives you another credit, gives you another scene, and so on until you're done with all the big titles. Right. Anyway, so
there's a lot of backwards and forwards. There's a lot of like, oh no, these characters are actually working together and they were working together the whole time. Oh no, it turns out he was also working with him the whole time to betray the two girls. Oh no, it turns out that Neve Campbell was like doing 2 layers of betrayal and was always going to like kill Kevin Bacon because she hates him for killing her friend. Not for locking her up, because at the start of the movie you think it's just because he arrested her for possession and she did 6 months in juvie or whatever it was. No, it's because Kevin Bacon did an unlawful shooting of her friend or boyfriend or whoever it was.
Yeah, and then she got put in jail because of that, because he was on a power trip and was like, and no one's gonna believe you.
Yeah. I will say the one thing that it didn't really click for me, and maybe it's just because at this point I just hadn't paid enough attention, but there's a whole thing around this part where it cuts to Perez, Bacon's partner, going to speak to like the old lady that sort of raised Neve Campbell after her parents died, and they're throwing around a lot of talk, and it's like that scene in like a lot of movies where, oh, this conversation is meant to be very illuminating because like, but they bring up the name of a person and I'm like, I have no idea who they're talking about right now. They mentioned it wasn't Kelly because that's Denise Richards' character, but there was like a character they mentioned, and I'm like, wait, what are you talking about?
I mean, the only character that I remember in that conversation was Davy. They were mentioning how Davy was the boyfriend, and they, it was basically the explanation of saying Kevin Bacon committed this crime, and that's why they were able to know he was a dirty cop.
There was definitely 1 or 2 other things they mentioned that just left me going, what's that about? I don't know. But the Perez is reacting as if, oh, that's intriguing. That's adding more to what I'm now suspecting is going on with this case. But regardless, it doesn't really matter that much ultimately. But it's I just, I don't know. It's all a bunch of twists and turns for the sake of twists and turns to me. I don't feel like, oh, this story was super interesting because once we find out what actually happened, it's not like it's suddenly got more depth because of what it's revealed. It's just, oh no, we've just been left, right, and this is where we land at the end.
No, I get what you're saying there. I'm not saying that it's not anything more than that in terms of depth, because I don't think it is. But I think that this idea of you're constantly left on your toes of who you're able to trust, who is actually in charge here, who's going to be able to even make it to the end, I think that it's something that is engaging. It's something that allows you to follow the movie, and you're a lot more intrigued rather than it just being a clear case of like, okay, here's our protagonist, we're going to trust them the whole way through. Like, from beginning to end, you don't know what's going to happen. And I don't know, I think that it's a very well put together script that is a lot different than a lot of other ones where the thriller is obviously from the beginning like, here's the good guy, here's the bad guy, and you might have a single flip like at the end to say like, oh, all of your assumptions were wrong, you couldn't trust anybody. This is the first one that I've seen where smack dab in the middle it flips that up and then just keeps doing it. It just keeps on giving the audience more and more to think about and more to say like, are you sure you want to trust them? Are you positive? So that by the time we get to the end, there's a sequence where she's killing Matt Dillon's character, and he suspects that his drink is poisoned. He's like, I don't know if I should have this because like, it seems like it's a clear case where you're going to try to kill me. And she's like, nah, not at all. And then it ends up, just being poisoned. Like, it's literally just played straight for the sake of, like, of course he was going to kill you.
I want to point out a specific detail here, right? Because he suspects that the drink she's made him is poison. And she goes, oh, come on, you're a bit paranoid. I mean, for a start, I need you to sail the boat. I'd be kind of screwed out here if you weren't here. But then it is poison, and it turns out she knows how to sail a boat. And the reason for this, like, broadly, is the old lady talking to Perez mentions that she's got like a genius IQ. She's like got 200 IQ, and she like could everything she ever tried to do, she picked up really quickly. And I'm like, okay, like it feels like it's just like, oh, this explains why she was smart enough to plot all of this convoluted web out and like make it all work.
All right, so I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna move it on to what I think a larger theme here is, a larger idea that you're supposed to lead with. It's this idea that, again, I wish that she would have not been Neve Campbell, but this idea that the trailer trash girl is the one who's constantly underestimated. Everybody looks at her slot in life, they look at how she was raised, and they say, okay, she's not going to amount to anything. but she ends up being the mastermind of it all. So it leaves you with this idea of, yeah, you know, looks can be deceiving, and that's not something that is easily, you shouldn't overlook somebody just because of how they came up in life, because they might be the one who's actually running the whole thing.
Do you know, it would have been really good to spend more time with her at the start of the movie to establish that she felt that way, like, before we get into anything else. Because I feel like half of what you're telling me we get from, like, the old lady telling that to the cops in various scenes, as opposed to... I mean, I think the only times it comes up with her specifically is when she says, oh, that's what you think of me, isn't it? When she's talking to Denise Richards or whoever.
Yeah, I think there should have been, like, maybe 1 or 2 lines in there to establish how smart she was. Just say something about, like, you know, oh, what are you going to do with your part of the money? You're going to pay for college? And she'd be like, nah, I've got scholarships, or something like that. Just something that makes it clear, like, she is this level of intelligence. Because as much as I think that everything else does have its tiny little hints to it, the little things that say that something is wrong and we get the payoff to it later, her being super intelligent is definitely something that only gets there in the last scene. Like you said, that old lady talk.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think it's really hinted at throughout the movie.
And that's what I'm saying. That's the one twist. I think it went too far. As much as I'm fine with her being the headmaster of it all, understanding like everything that's going on is her plans, I think that they went just a tiny bit too far, and they should have either cut back on like the killing of Matt Dillon maybe, or something else, just to bump that one twist earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get what you're saying about the Neve Campbell casting at this point. Although I don't think the casting's that much of a problem if the script just spent more time actually really getting to the idea of like, because like I mean, we said ages ago at this point that for the first half of the movie, she kind of starts like as a background character. We don't pay attention to her that much. We don't focus on her. It's not until she then comes out as a second possible victim that she starts getting more screen time, and that changes. But, you know, like, something as simple as, like, maybe when she was on trial, maybe if, like, some of the lawyer questions or something was trying to steer the jury into seeing her as nothing but trailer trash to try and discredit her or something like that. Or, you know, have it come up in other ways so that it's like a core theme. I think the problem... I kind of like, in theory, what you're saying you got from this, like, reveal at the end. I just don't feel like the movie actually sets it up enough where I felt like, oh, that was a theme the whole time. I get it. That's the character I should have been secretly rooting for the whole time. Instead, I just kind of feel like, okay, sure.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that she's the character we should have been rooting for the whole time, because obviously the plan on every single character's level here involved murder and lying and like all this extra stuff. So everyone's a villain. Nobody here is the protagonist, really. They're all just whoever it is we're following at any point.
She is technically the most sympathetic. I mean, obviously, yeah, she wants revenge to some extent, but she wants revenge for someone getting murdered, not just because they, you know, did their job, right? So
yeah.
So
okay.
So you've got him, right, and then you've got Matt Dillon's character is a sleazy teacher who's having sex with his students, right? And probably was already having sex with her because they established that in the court case, that they already had this close, you know, student-teacher relationship for a while.
Right.
So you can maybe infer there that was already going on for a while. And she saw that as being, you know, whatever, taking advantage of her, or you know, he wasn't there when she was arrested, that kind of thing. Because she was,
the end credits show it was literally blackmail.
Yeah, he was literally too busy having sex with Denise Richards when she was getting arrested. That's actually one of the other things the end credits show. Is that that night when he wasn't there to pick up the one phone call that she had, it was because he was with her. So that also sets up why she might want revenge on Denise Richards. Like, you know, that one's a little bit more shallow, admittedly, because like Denise Richards didn't know she was doing that to her. But
yeah. That I guess that is one more plot hole that I didn't quite get, and it kind of just felt like the sleaziness level of it. In the pool scene, there's a scene where Neve Campbell's freaking out. Denise Richards and her have a fight in the pool. We see that Kevin Bacon is recording all this, trying to get some sort of evidence as to the fact that it's, you know, actually all just a scam, and they didn't actually, or they knowingly went up there and lied in front of the court, and like it was all just a scam. Those two share like a kiss. Like they lean in, they share a moment and stuff. And
It goes a bit further than that, though, right?
I think it zooms out camera wise, but we definitely see a kiss there. So maybe it does go deeper. But
maybe you watched like an R-rated cut and I watched the uncut version. But there was definitely there was like taking off of a bikini top. There was sort of.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't get any of that. I think I got the R version. But no, regardless of what it was, there's this thing of, okay, Matt Dillon got blackmailed into this, and that's the whole reason he's going along with it. Matt Dillon then convinced Kevin Bacon's character to go along with it, not knowing Neve Campbell was even involved, so that's why he's in on it. And then I could understand that Matt Dillon could convince Denise Richards' character to go along with this, but I don't understand where this relationship between Neve Campbell and Denise Richards came from, unless it was genuine on the part of, like, Denise Richards actually thought it was a real thing.
Yeah, no, I think she did. I think the idea is that they didn't really have a relationship with each other until they like were both through him, right? I think the idea that in like the scene where we first see them all together and they're revealing that they've done this and they have the threesome, he specifically has a moment after he's kissed both of them where he says, "Okay, now you two kiss," and sort of pushes their heads together.
Right.
It feels like that was kind of like a spark, or like I think this is a genuine scene from Denise Richards' side of like feeling something in the moment. Obviously, I would have said the same for Neve Campbell in the scene at the time, but obviously where it goes at the end, she was thinking on like 3 or 4 levels beyond this at this point. This was all manipulating of her, but and you could also maybe say something for the idea that, you know, like when she's freaking out and Denise Richards is on the phone to Matt Dillon says, "Hey, baby, I'm going to need to trust you to take care of this." I think it's kind of maybe a little interesting that her method of taking care of it is to just sort of seduce her and use sex to like calm her down, because it seems like something that Matt Dillon does with them. And so she's, you know, I
mean, the very first thing she does is literally backhand her and try to drown her in a pool temporarily.
I'm not saying it's her first thing, but it does
on the list.
It becomes that though. It becomes like, oh, well, that's not going to work, so let's have this intimate kind of moment.
Yeah, that's fair. And although looking at it back on it now, the sequence that very shortly follows is them going down to the beach where they fake Neve's murder. And I mean, Denise Richards is all knowledgeable about that, because he says, "Hey, why don't you go back to the car and get a blanket?" And she comes back already pre-prepared with plastic sheets. So she must have known to some level what they were doing that night, regardless of if she cared about Neve or not.
Yeah, that wasn't the same night though. They were at the pool together. That was like,
that was probably like the next night.
Yeah.
But still, it was close enough.
But I think that's the point though. Is the escalation is like, oh, it's starting to feel like Neve's not going to be able to hold it together. So he then suggests, "Hey, I think we're going to have to kill her." And she's obviously been talked into, or maybe she instantly agreed. Who knows? But I think that's the progression here. Is that it's about convincing Denise Richards that Neve Campbell has to go. They fake Neve's death. And then Kevin's Bacon whole thing as a cop at this point is he's convinced that, oh, this guy's going to turn on them and kill both of them because he wants the money for himself. So when Neve Campbell goes missing, he's like, oh, he's done it. He's killed one of them. The other one's, in danger now. We have to keep an eye on her. And him pretending to be going to her to protect her is what ends up leading to her getting killed by him. And he says that she pulled a gun on him and it was a clean shot. Obviously, the mid-credit scene, which shows what actually happened, kind of completely throws that out the window.
Well, even in the movie, that's one of those things where it gives you that hint beforehand, because there's 2 shots and then a third shot. And on that third shot, you hear Kevin Bacon groan. But then as he's recounting the story to the other cop saying exactly what happened, he's like, "She shot me once, I got hit, and then I shot twice into her." So obviously that flip there, if you remember the scene, is like, wait a minute, that's not the order of things. The 2 shots happen first and then the third shot.
Yeah. I have to admit, I don't think I noticed that. Like, I remember hearing the shots. I don't think I noticed the order of them.
Yeah, I mean, I just recapped because as soon it was immediately followed by his recount of the events, and I was like, wait a minute, that's not how it played out. And I just had a little Phoenix Wright objection moment. Where I'm like, oh, I caught you in a lie there, buddy.
Yeah, and of course, this gets him like fired from being a police officer. And next time we see him, he's with Matt Dillon, wherever Matt Dillon's hanging out now, somewhere near a beach.
It's like
And
Mexico or something.
yeah, they're like, hey, you've got your boat and blah blah blah. Like, okay, like, let's go. And Matt Dillon's like, hey, I've set up the transfer for your half of the money, but they said it'll take 2 business days, so hang around for a little bit. Let's go on a boat ride.
Yeah, that's the moment where the filmmakers realize that they know, that no one, like, they're gonna try to kill each other, and they're not even trying to mask at this point, because the moment that he says, like, oh yeah, it's gonna take 2 business days, but how about we just relax for a while, everything in the movie is just screaming out like, he's gonna kill you, it's gonna happen. Even Kevin Bacon realizes that. He's like, I'm not so big on boats, buddy.
I think, do you know what would really go a long way is if I think the characters themselves were a lot more, I don't know, what's the word? I guess just entertaining. Like, because there's definitely movies with characters that are not likable in a sympathetic way, but they're so. In fact, actually, I'm going to go back to The Last Seduction because this kind of ties into this. Is
Okay.
In Last Seduction, it's not so much that you are rooting for that main character to do what she's doing, because obviously what she's doing is bad, but you're just kind of, you know, if it worked for you, you weren't as hot on it. But for most people, they get into it because, like, watching them have to actually figure out how to land on their feet, like, figure things out, manipulate people. Watching those gears play out and actually how good the character is at it, you just become fascinated by seeing how good they are at it. And maybe one of the critiques that I'd have of this movie is that you don't really get, for the most part, you don't get to see how good anyone is at doing anything. And, like, maybe the Neve Campbell being the mastermind would have worked a bit better if they'd revealed her a little earlier in the movie, and we got to see a bit more of how she actually operates or something.
I mean, I'm not going to say it couldn't work, but I don't
know.
I don't see it improving it much. I think for me, there's so many. It's the difference between a clockmaker idea where the plan is set beforehand and it all just runs out because it was all perfectly planned to begin with, and a juggler, someone who's able to adapt on the fly and fix things as they come and be able to do that. I think Last Seduction's a lot more of a juggler aspect where she's able to roll with the punches, take the hits, and just make the plan work regardless. But I think that this one's a lot more of a clockmaker, and I think the reveal of who the clockmaker is at the end is kind of half the fun of it. I mean, I can't really mention other movies without spoiling them, but
obviously.
I think the big one that everybody's kind of aware of at this point is Usual Suspects. I think that one is the same sort of idea of, like, who is the clockmaker in that.
And that's actually a very overrated movie, so maybe there's something to this about this being kind of shallow and shit.
I mean, that's fine, but it's in regards of how it's set up and all that, it's got staying power. It's got a reason that people still talk about it.
Okay. I never really felt the impact of it, and just to go back to what I was starting with that point, because I kind of pivoted into a new point, is that I just don't, like, I could see a movie where you get to this point where you've got 2 characters that you've established well, and we know as the audience that they're going to try and kill each other, and how exciting and entertaining that could be, how, like, fun it is, like, oh, they're going to keep trying and failing and whatever. And I just didn't have that sense of excitement, because I don't think either character is that interesting on their own. Like, they're not that, like, honestly, the person in this movie with the most personality and character is absolutely Bill Murray. And that's like, I mean, it's maybe not surprising because he's Bill Murray, but actually, to go back to him for a second, when he's introduced in this movie, and Matt Dillon goes into the little lawyer's office, very Saul Goodman-esque, and he speaks to the receptionist. The way Bill Murray sticks his head up from behind the little wall where his desk is, it's almost the exact same way Peter Venkman stands up in Ghostbusters when Dana walks into the station.
Oh, yeah.
Very similar. I don't know if that was intentional, but it's the first thing I thought of, the way he popped up like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously it's not a Peter Venkman thing directly, but he's wearing a neck brace for a lot of the movie.
Yes.
And he makes it very clear early on. He's just like, there was an insurance guy around earlier. I don't actually need this.
Yes, he's wearing his neck brace throughout the entire, like, trial and all that. I really, like, I don't know if I've ever seen a lawyer do this before in a movie, but when he started his little, like, you know, interview or whatever with the Neve Campbell.
The deposition.
Deposition, yes. Before he started it, he walked over to the jury and just sort of said, "Hi, how you all doing?" He said, it was just very casually went over and said good morning to them all, and I'm like, oh, that's a tactic. Make them feel like you're their friend.
Oh yeah, we're just buddies. We're just here having a chat, talking about how stupid this white trash girl is.
Yes. So yeah, he was entertaining. He's very quirky, a lot of personality, and it's maybe a little bit of personality that was perhaps missing from some of the other characters that you know, like, because I mean the guys were being played very, very straight, right? I think it's fair to say. Actually, do you know who's got the second most amount of character in this? It's probably the mum, the horny mum. Because she actually has a fair bit of personality in the way she reacts to things. There's a lot of, you know.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. I don't think that's I mean, don't get me wrong, that is depth to her in like emotional sense, but I don't feel like that's understanding her character any better.
No, I'm not arguing that it's depth. I'm arguing that it's at least entertaining, as opposed to all the dry main characters who are relying on the twists to be interesting, you know?
I would say that Kelly, Denise Richards, she's got some big moments for her. She's got some big lashing out moments. I'm thinking like the court scene. I'm thinking the pool scene.
Yeah,
I think she does a pretty good job as well.
Yeah, when she gets mad and tells someone to F off, that's... Yeah, there's some merit to it. Like, I feel like they could have almost went a little bit more like fun and cartoony with the characters, and that might have lent itself better to the type of twist that it was pulling off, because then it would feel like we're not trying to take it seriously, we're just trying to enjoy the pulpiness of it. But you know, maybe it's hard to do that when you're revolving your first 40 minutes around a teenage girl accusing a man of rape. Like, it's hard to turn that into a more lighthearted story. Like, there's a level of like having to take that seriously you have to do. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know the way around that for me necessarily.
Yeah, no, I get the point you're making, and I understand like where they're coming from. I think it's just a difference of, I just had a bunch more enjoyment out of this than you did by the end of it. I wasn't groaning or anything like that, so I'm willing to forgive a lot of these smaller gripes of like the character development and stuff like that, because it was never, this movie was never about the character development. It was never about the idea of having these in-depth characters that were exploring their motivations or whatnot. It is literally, it's a heist movie in everything but name. It is an idea that they have their eyes on a prize and they set up this whole convoluted plot in order to get the money away. And then as you think things are coming up to stop them, it was all part of the plan.
Yeah, the first half's a heist, the second half is the group of thieves all falling out because they all don't trust each other. That's kind of, if they follow a structure, that's kind of what it is. And again, I'm not saying I needed that much depth in the character development necessarily, but I would have liked to enjoy watching them more. And I don't think I ever really enjoyed watching Matt Dillon's character all that much. And even to an extent, Kevin Bacon's character. Kevin Bacon's cop character, for the most part, was, I don't know, like, I didn't find him that interesting, that, you know, entertaining to watch. And the only time he kind of like perks up a little bit is when you reveal, oh, he's actually working with the other bad guy the whole time. Everything up until that point, he almost feels like a cliche of a character, and that's maybe even intentional because they want them all to feel like cliches early on, because they're all playing parts in a concoction of, but that doesn't make it any more entertaining to actually watch it play out. So I think it's a combination of a couple of different things. I think it's the tone they've chosen to go with. It's how seriously they take certain things, but obviously it is quite pulpy overall. But then you've got this sort of late 90s kind of sleazy tone to it on top of that. And I don't know, that combination for me just did not work. I mean, I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was like the worst thing ever, but I never felt that engaged with it. I never really felt like I was enjoying the twists. You know, but I didn't like the reveal that a character's been the mastermind of everything and that they're winning. I should feel some sort of excitement from that, like, oh, I'm glad this character turned out to be the mastermind, or oh, it's exciting to find out why they're the mastermind and why they're doing this, or something like that. And my reaction to Neve Campbell being alive and then being the mastermind was just, oh, I guess this is happening now. Oh, and now this is happening now.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but that's literally a problem I had with the last twist and none of the other ones. I think everything up until that point, I was totally cool with. I was like, oh, okay, that's clever, that's cool. It was only once we hit the Neve being alive and her being the mastermind, I was like, Okay, yeah, are we going to keep doing this? How far into the credits am I going to have to watch until I find out that, like, actually it was Batman?
I mean, to even go along with something you're saying, I think the reason why that last one sticks out is particularly egregious is that while I'm not in love with a lot of the other twists, at least they thematically all linked with the idea that the characters are all double crossing each other. And yes, technically Neve Campbell is just double crossing someone with the reveal that she's the mastermind. It's a lot more, because with Kevin Bacon and Matt Dillon, it felt like at this point they were just turning on each other because they didn't trust each other, right? It felt like at this point it wasn't necessarily because it was part of a plan, even though technically it was, because Neve Campbell was pulling the strings of Matt Dillon the entire time anyway. But yeah, I don't know.
I get what you're saying. There's something different about the idea of faking your death. Like, it just seems a little bit of an extra level deeper.
Well, it's not even just that. It's just the idea that like the opening, like half of the movie, which is about, okay, we're going to do this thing with multiple characters. One's going to accuse one of something, another one's going to back it up, but then break under pressure in court, which will be very convincing and it'll lead to the outcome they want. All of that felt, plausible enough, and in the way that it worked. The mechanics of it made sense to me. Where it starts to feel convoluted is where you've got characters predicting how they're going to fall apart after that, and how, like, there's levels of manipulation, because it's not just like Neve Campbell has to understand the fact that, okay, we have to convince Denise Richards that I need to die, and then we'll frame her. There's also the juggling of what Kevin Bacon is doing, and Kevin Bacon's working for Matt Dillon, but he's secretly getting orders from Neve Campbell as to what should be happening. So just the idea of orchestrating all this is at a point where it's like so messy and like so genius level that waving it off at the end is, yeah, she's literally a genius. Just accept that and move on. Is just, I don't know. It's a bit unsatisfying to me.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but I don't feel the same. I felt like it was perfectly satisfying. Is it a little bit convoluted by the end, and you have to, like, if you really think through the layers of, like, what she had to go through in order to set this up, even outside of the bits that we saw in the end credits, yeah, obviously it is wildly convoluted and insanely complicated, but I think that that's part of the charm of it. Part of the fun of it is this idea that, like, yeah, we're not talking about her being, oh, she's in the gifted classes of high school level smart. Like, her I don't know if it was supposed to be father or whoever that was, specifically said 200 IQ. Like, that's insanely, ridiculously, crazy smart. That's like Lex Luthor levels of smart there.
Yeah. I don't to add. I've said a piece.
Yeah, fair enough.
I find it underwhelming, bit trashy. It didn't work for me.
Now, I mean, if we ever did any of the sequels, I am almost certain I'm going to echo those sentiments, like 100%.
Just watch Wild Things 2 be such an unsung gem.
God, wouldn't that just be the worst? Like, you're like, oh man, this is much better than the original, and I'm sitting there like, no, Pete, no, stop.
Yeah, I know. We sort of talked about this in like a weird way compared to normal, but I felt like going through like scene by scene or close to that just felt weird for this one, because it changes so often that I feel like you're talking about so many scenes with like the context just not there yet to actually discuss it.
Yeah, it feels like every other sentence in that would be, don't worry, we'll get to it.
Yes.
Rather than actually talking about the movie.
So I think it made sense to sort of start with the overall idea of it and then just sort of dip into anything that felt worth bringing up and talking about.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. But I don't know if I have much more to really get to be honest.
Honestly, I'm feeling pretty... We're just going to keep on looping over the same ideas of the ending kind of is a hit or miss for both of us. And then as much as I think that the cliches are intentional, this idea that it starts off feeling like any other 90s sort of sex film where you've got all these hot girls in bikinis and white t-shirts and they're playing Semi-Charmed Life and all that, I feel like I can see where you're coming from of if the cliche hits a bit too hard, then it's going to be harder to pull yourself out of that when they want to take it in a different direction.
Yeah, just a little bit of a knowing tongue in cheek if you're doing the cliches, maybe would go a long way. or at least try and still give me something to anchor onto while you're doing the cliches. Like, give me some core, whether it be a character or playful idea that could be like, okay, this is what the movie can where the merit can come from, where I can get excited about it. But
yeah, I would say the only other thing I wanted to bring up is middle beginnings in those opening sequences. He goes off on a while, Matt Dillon's character, to one of his students about how just awesome boating is and how you know you can learn a hard day's work on a boat. And I started getting White Squall flashbacks. I was like, no, please, I don't want to spend my time working on a boat and learning the meaning of a hard day's work. Please, I beg of you.
All right. What's your scene of the movie, David?
I really should have been thinking about this, shouldn't I? I don't know. I feel like
the one with the nudity.
Yeah, the middle scene where the forced threesome happens. That's absolutely it. No, I think my scene of the movie is probably going to be the part. I'm not going to say the death itself, but you may as well include it because it's just so close together. Of the Neve Campbell faking her death, and where it's all just coming together of, you know, they're leading her out into the beach and you know it's coming, you know that like she's gonna die somehow, it's just written in the scene, but you're still feeling tense the whole way through of like, is Denise Richards gonna do it? Is he gonna do it? Are they gonna do it together? How's it gonna be done? And it all just explodes out in the end to a big climax. So yeah, I'll give it to that one.
I'm also picking a scene that ends with a big climax.
Yeah.
I don't know what you picked, to be honest, because I'm very lukewarm in the movie. I don't know if there's any.
You could just say Kevin Bacon's dick. Like, that's fine.
I didn't really want to pick Kevin Bacon's dick, believe it or not. Yeah, it's definitely not the ending stuff. You know what? I'll go. Which Bill Murray scene do I want?
Yeah.
I don't want a Bill Murray scene, but I don't know which
my secondary one, if I didn't pick that one, the other one I was considering was the courtroom breakdown, because Bill Murray's just so charming as he's like, now you're under oath, so I'm going to ask you again.
Actually, I think I will pick that, but not just because Bill Murray was great in the scene. I actually really like the prosecutor getting upset because he realized that it's all about to unravel, and he's trying to just think of any reason to yell and say, no, he's leading the witness, no, he's pressuring her, and the judge is like, I think I want to hear what she was about to say, so shut up and sit down.
I also love in that sequence where Denise Richards' dad just like steps into the bar area and he's like, Your Honor, if I may. And she's like, no, you're not a part of this case. Sit your ass down. And he's just like, oh, okay.
Also, we never mentioned this, but Denise Richards' mum in this has like a boyfriend who wants to beat up Matt Dillon, and
he's the one who drives him off the road earlier on, just on behalf of the mom.
Yeah, he's just kind of jealous even to begin with, though, because like Sandra makes it very clear that Matt Dillon's the best she's ever had, and this is like right after she's had sex with this guy, and he just looks like just destroyed in the inside. He's like, oh no.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's going on.
So I need to bring this up before we end this review, and I know we've still got a few other things, but I need to bring this up because I just read this. Apparently in the unrated version, so I'm hoping that's the version you had, it is revealed that one of the reasons why Susie was going after the money was because she is the illegitimate older half-sister of Sandra Van Ryan.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up. Yeah, that's a reveal that comes up. Oh God, Perez was in the scene because it was when I remember when I was saying there was a lot of shit getting talked about with the old lady about Neve Campbell's backstory. This was all in there too. This was all this conversation went on for ages.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that.
Yeah. So they started talking about all this, and because. Yeah, I remember having the thought, so the threesome was like also a bit incestuous then, that we're bringing it up.
I mean, you're right, yeah.
Because they're half-sisters. Yeah, that was the whole thing, is that Neve Campbell was... Wait, Neve Campbell was the illegitimate child?
The illegitimate half-sister of Sandra.
Yeah.
So Kelly's mom is like a half-sister with Neve. Meaning that her dad, Sandra's dad, Kelly's grandfather, would have stepped out and had an illegitimate kid.
That was the thing. I think that's what earlier on when I was saying they started mentioning people, I think they were talking about that grandfather character.
Okay.
And I was
that's
like,
why I had no idea.
Yeah, I was like, who are they talking about? Yeah, that makes sense now. Now that this has all been cleared up, yeah. So, yeah, that's brought up, and yeah, it turns out they're half sisters. Yes.
And I mean, that at least explains why the money was on the table, because up until the point that I saw in the movie, the only thing that was driving her was revenge against Kevin Bacon. So I'm glad now the money makes sense.
Yeah, but again, speaking of things that, like, it felt like they were doing a lot to, like, give a lot of, like, reasons to Neve Campbell's character for wanting to do all this in the first place. And it felt like just too much. I'm glad you brought it, because so usually I watch the movie pretty soon before we record. In this case, I watched it, like, before I slept last night, which
okay.
So some details have faded, and that's one that slipped by because there was so much other shit going on. I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair, but why would that only be in the unrated cut? Would someone just like pull out a tit in the middle of that and just say like, all right, here we go?
No. Well, because we've said this before, unrated, it's meant to sound sexy, like there's stuff that's too hot for the regular version. But usually all it means is that there's extra scenes and they didn't submit it to the MPAA. That's it. That's all it is.
That's fair. That's fair. To be fair, I think the MPAA would look a little bit down on the threesome scene if we added in the extra incest as well.
Whatever. So she's having sex with her auntie. No. Yeah?
No, yeah, you're right. Kelly
auntie.
is.
Yeah. Yes. Neve Campbell is Kelly's
Florida,
auntie.
man. Never change.
And I think Neve Campbell knows this.
I mean, yeah, because she would have been going for the money. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Some Game of Thrones shit in there.
All right. Who's your MVP of the movie?
Oh, God. Again, I don't want to say Bill Murray. Like, I'm looking for any excuse to give it to somebody else who actually, like, did a lot in this movie, but he's not a one scene wonder, he's like a 3-scene wonder, but he's still a wonder. Like every time he shows up, he just steals the scene away. And the fact that entire courtroom scene, like Neve Campbell's given this teary-eyed performance, Denise Richards is like about to jump the bench and try to leap and attack Neve Campbell. There's a lot of big emotions going, but the only character I think of in that sequence is Bill Murray. So I gotta give it to him.
He's not a character that I like, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm going Bill Murray as well. Yeah, weird choice. But hey, all right. What are you rating Wild Things? What wild rating are you giving this movie?
I don't think it's going to be that wild, all things considered. Again, I think this is a little bit better than you do, but I do recognize its shallowness. I do recognize that it is just built off this idea of twists on each other. I don't think that there is a lot of deeper craft that goes into this movie. I just had a good time with it personally. So overall, I am still going to give it a positive rating of a 7, but it's not going to be even up there on the same level as Basic Instinct.
I mean, 7 means good. That means you think the movie's good.
I think the movie was good.
5 out of 10 for me. Okay,
fair enough.
I think it's a middling movie. It's convoluted. It's kind of trashy in places. And its twists don't make the characters or the story more interesting. They're just more twists. That's at least that's how I felt as I was watching it. Okay. So I can't be any more positive than that. But
fair enough. Now, here's the part that we might have problems with. Does this movie make the cut?
No.
Gonna have to argue with you, Pete. I don't think that it's a making the cut fully, but I would argue at least cutting it close, and I feel pretty strong about that one.
I mean, I've made my position very clear on the matter.
Oh, okay, never mind then. I'll just put away my one thing where we have to agree. Look, I gave. What
5 out of 10s have we put in the collection?
I'm not saying the collection. I'm saying cutting it close. Okay. And I want to turn your attention back to just The Last Seduction, where I gave that a 4.5 and came up to meet you on a cutting it close.
Well, that's because you give that a crazy rating, though.
You gave this a better rating than that, and I can't get up to a cutting it close.
Yeah, but that just further emphasized how silly your rating for Last Seduction was.
Oh my God, Pete, come on, just meet me halfway here, buddy. I've done so much.
Oh, fine, it's kind of close. Jesus
Thank
Christ,
you.
stupid bullshit with a bunch of nonsense.
See, this is why we have to agree on these. It makes it more fun. I'm actually really curious about next week's movie because I have connections with that movie. Like, that's one of the few that I've seen a couple of times. So I'm curious how this is going to turn out.
What's funny actually is when this movie was starting, it was the only time where I went, "Oh, this may actually have some similar like elements to Cruel Intentions," because that's also school teenagers, seducing of an older person. Obviously, it doesn't go in the same directions as this one does, but
right.
Just there's more parallels between them than perhaps any two other movies in this entire season, which is interesting. But yeah, so the final episode of the season is indeed going to be Cruel Intentions. So we're ending with a 1999 movie, which just feels just right for a season about 90s movies. So that is what's coming next time. Then there'll be a week off, of course, and then we'll get a little twofer with a Gladiator season, which is just obviously just 2 movies, but that's what's coming up in the next few weeks of Collector's Cut.
Very quick season. It's not one of those Canadian seasons where you get to experience the whole thing. It's like it's a Mexico season where winter's done just like that.
So that is what's coming up. Of course, you can support the show and all the things that you might enjoy here on Male Fuzz Movies or Male Fuzz TV, the other YouTube channel where I do TV show reviews. You can support all of that with patreon.com/MaleFuzzTV and help keep the shows coming. Wouldn't be able to do this without the support over there or via YouTube membership if that's more your thing. But you get bonus content such as the Criterion Cut, which is a monthly show where me and David review a movie from the Criterion Collection. Usually they're much better than this movie. And then we also do a show called Extra Reels where we do some of the worst movies ever made. And they're usually worse than this movie.
Don't you test me, Pete.
I said usually.
Don't you push me.
I said usually.
Usually and mostly should be very interchangeable here.
You see, okay, I'm not saying that I would rate anything we've done in Extra Reels higher than this movie, but I would definitely rather watch Miami Connection again than watch this again.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I have a whole... I'm looking at the whole list right now, and I would say at least half of those I would rather watch than this again. But that's just because they're in their own class. They're their own special little thing.
Yes, that's because you love Christian Mingle, the movie, which is one of the movies that we did on that show.
Yes, totally. I mean, if we're talking legitimately, Mac and Me is up there.
We did a big episode on Madam Web a couple of months ago. But regardless, if you want to support all the content and get some bonuses, you can do that over at Patreon. So thank you very much for joining us, everyone. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies. And of course, if you can get it, it's always nice to have diplomatic immunity.